What is the purpose of life if all we do is suffer? It's a question people avoid with the same instinct they use to avoid looking over the edge of a cliff. It makes the ground beneath their beliefs feel unstable. But the truth is, this question lives inside everyone, like a quiet whisper beneath the noise of everyday life. You've heard it before, maybe late at night, maybe after a heartbreak, maybe during a moment where everything felt pointless. You tried to push it away because you were taught that asking this makes you negative or ungrateful or too philosophical. But ask yourself honestly, what has ignoring the question ever given you? Has pretending everything is fine made the suffering go away? Has avoiding the truth made you feel any more alive? People cling to comforting lies because they fear the chaos of questioning reality, yet suffering knocks on their door every single day through expectations, disappointments, loss, frustration, loneliness, and that strange emptiness that appears even on ordinary afternoons. And ironically, the only way to make peace with suffering is to stop running from it and walk straight into the fire. From the moment you were born, beliefs were handed to you like inherited furniture. You didn't choose them. They were placed into your mind before you even understood language. Life has a purpose, they said. You were born for a reason. Everything is part of a bigger plan. But notice something. When you grow up and ask, what is that purpose? What is that plan? People suddenly lose their confidence. They answer with vague placeholders: happiness, family, success, faith, as if these are universal truths and not recycled script lines passed down through generations that were just as lost as you. If happiness were the purpose, why is it so temporary? If success were the purpose, why do successful people still break down? If family were the purpose, why do so many broken families exist? None of these explanations actually answer the question. They only distract you from it. And yet you took these borrowed definitions and ran with them, chasing meaning like a mirage in the desert. You expected purpose to appear in school, in friendships, in romance, in achievements, in milestones. But what happened? Even when you reached those milestones, the emptiness remained. You achieved something you once prayed for, and instead of fulfillment, you felt nothing. Just a temporary high followed by a quiet return of the same old question. Why? Suffering didn't come later in life. It started before you understood what life even was. You cried at birth because the world was cold, loud, unfamiliar. From that moment, suffering wasn't an interruption. It was the foundation. Look around. Every living creature struggles. A bird freezes in the winter wind, a lion starves during drought, a flower grows by breaking the soil. Even the earth moves violently through earthquakes and storms. So why do humans believe suffering should be optional for them? Why do we treat pain as a personal attack instead of a natural law? Because unlike animals, humans turn pain into philosophy. Animals feel pain and react. Humans feel pain and ask, why does this hurt? What does this mean? Who is responsible? But not all questions lead to answers. Some questions reveal the truth that the world isn't built around human comfort. Life is not a story written for you. You are the one writing the story while pretending it's already been written. Pain exists because existence exists, not as punishment, not as lesson, but as the friction required for anything to live, move, change, or grow. Pain is the price consciousness pays for awareness. But here's where the real existential earthquake begins. What if life has no pre-written purpose at all? What if all the talk about destiny, fate, divine plans, and cosmic meaning is just humanity's way of avoiding a terrifying thought? That we were born without instructions, without guarantees, without meaning. Most people panic at this possibility because it feels like the ground disappears beneath them. They ask, if life has no purpose, then what's the point of living? But notice the hidden assumption. They think meaning must be given to them. They think purpose must come from outside. religion, society, success, love, achievement. But what if that entire expectation is the problem? What if meaning isn't something you discover, but something you create? This idea is frightening at first because it removes the safety net. You can't blame fate for your emptiness anymore. You can't blame God for not sending a message. You can't blame life for not revealing a mission. Suddenly, you are the one responsible for creating meaning, and responsibility feels heavy. But it's also liberation, because if meaning isn't pre-assigned, then you are not trapped. You are not bound to any script. You are not obligated to follow pathways built by people who lived and died before you. You can choose your meaning in the same way an artist chooses colors for a painting. And if you don't choose, someone else will choose for you. Society, family, culture, expectations. This is why so many people feel lost, not because life has no meaning, but because they were told meaning would find them. They sat waiting for purpose to knock on the door, waiting for clarity to descend, waiting for a sign. But purpose doesn't arrive. You arrive into it. Think about this. When has clarity ever come without suffering? When has transformation ever come without disruption? When has meaning ever appeared during comfort? The moments that shaped you the most weren't the easy ones. They were the ones that broke you, challenged you, forced you to confront truths you tried to avoid. Yet people treat suffering as if it's a malfunction in the system, when in reality, suffering is the system. It is the pressure that forms identity, the fire that burns illusions, the catalyst for awakening.
The scripts you were given taught you to avoid suffering, but avoiding suffering only deepens it. You were told to stay busy, stay positive, stay productive, stay entertained, anything except stay aware. But distraction doesn't erase the void, it only delays the confrontation. And that's why anxiety grows, that's why emptiness spreads, that's why people wake up one day and realize they've been living someone else's life. Not because they chose wrongly, but because they never chose consciously. They simply followed the path laid out for them and assumed purpose would appear somewhere along the way. But purpose doesn't live on roads built by others. Meaning doesn't hide behind obedience. The truth doesn't reveal itself to people who avoid silence. You only meet yourself when the noise fades, and that is exactly why suffering is necessary. It forces silence. It forces introspection. It forces you to see the truth behind the illusions that kept you asleep. Let's dig even deeper into the structure underneath, why suffering feels so heavy, why meaning collapses under its weight, and why life becomes unbearable the moment you stop distracting yourself. Because suffering isn't just emotional pain, it is the architecture that shapes your identity, your expectations, your fears, your choices, even your relationships. People think suffering is something that happens to them, something external, something placed upon their shoulders by fate or circumstance. But suffering is far more intimate than that. Suffering comes from the inside, from your attachments, from the narratives you cling to, from your resistance to reality. And the cruelest twist is this: most of the pain you feel is not caused by what happened, but what you believed should have happened instead. Ask yourself honestly, when were you hurt the most? Was it when someone left you? Or when you believed they wouldn't? Was it when a dream failed? Or when you believed effort guaranteed success? Was it when life changed suddenly? Or when you believed life would stay the same? You suffer not because life is unpredictable, but because you expect predictability. You suffer not because people disappoint you, but because you expect consistency from beings who are constantly changing. You suffer not because life is cruel, but because you keep demanding it be kind in ways it never promised. This is the first great misunderstanding of suffering. It isn't the event that destroys you. It's your refusal to accept the event. The pain of reality lasts seconds. The pain of resisting reality lasts years. Consider the most ordinary forms of suffering. Someone you trusted betrays you. A friend stops speaking to you. A relationship fades slowly, painfully.
without explanation. These things hurt, yes, but why? Because you believed you had control over them. You believed loyalty guaranteed permanence. You believed love prevented loss. But people don't operate on guarantees. They operate on emotions, wounds, timing, circumstances, insecurities, histories you'll never fully understand. When someone leaves you, they aren't breaking a law of the universe. They are continuing the flow of life, a flow you wanted to freeze because it felt safe. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't suffer when things change. You suffer because you expected them not to. Every heartbreak is a story of attachment clashing with impermanence. But let's look deeper, because suffering isn't just about people, it's about identity. Every belief you hold about who you are becomes a seed of suffering the moment life challenges it. Think about the identities you cling to. I am strong. I am kind. I am in control. I am important. The moment reality contradicts these statements, when you break down crying, when your kindness is ignored, when life reminds you how powerless you really are, you feel shattered. But who is suffering? The real you, or the image of you that you spent years crafting? Most suffering comes from defending a self that never truly existed. The version of you that you present to others, confident, composed, capable, it collapses the moment life introduces chaos, and chaos always arrives because life is not built around stability, it is built around change. This is why suffering often feels like a personal attack, because it destroys the illusions you depended on for emotional safety. But suffering is not an enemy, it is a mirror. It reflects the stories you told yourself. It exposes the expectations you were unaware of. It shows you exactly where your attachments live. And attachments are the roots of all human pain. Attachment to people, attachment to outcomes, attachment to identities, attachment to beliefs, attachment to a version of reality that only existed in your imagination. If suffering feels unbearable, it is because you have built your life on foundations that cannot withstand the truth. But what is the truth? That people change, feelings change, you change, life changes. The ground shifts beneath your feet whether you approve or not, and the more you resist this movement, the more suffering pulls you under. Humans crave permanence, yet they were born into a world that guarantees impermanence. This contradiction is the core of suffering. It is why even joy can hurt, because the moment you feel joy, a part of you fears losing it. The very things that bring meaning to life, love, passion, dreams, are the same things that expose you to pain because you cannot hold them forever. You can only witness them, participate in them, and then let them go.
Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever looked at an old photograph and felt a pain you couldn't explain? A picture from a time when life felt simpler or lighter or warmer, even if you didn't realize it at the time. That pain is suffering disguised as nostalgia. It is the grief of losing versions of yourself you never learned to mourn. Think about the child you once were, the teenager who dreamed fearlessly, the young adult who believed life was full of possibilities. Those versions of you died silently as you grew, yet you never gave them a funeral. You mourn people who leave, but you never mourn the parts of yourself that faded without warning. This is why suffering feels so personal, because it isn't just about losing something outside of you, it's about losing something inside of you. A belief, a dream, an illusion, a version of yourself. And the pain you carry isn't just emotional, it's existential. It is the pain of realizing that you are not a fixed being. You are an evolving process. And evolution is violent. Growth is violent. Awakening is violent. You cannot become someone new without killing parts of who you were. And this internal death feels like suffering because you never learned to distinguish between what is dying for you and what is dying to you. Not every loss is a tragedy. Some losses are transitions. But people resist transitions because they fear the void that follows. They fear the space left behind when something they depended on disappears. The void feels like nothingness, like meaning dissolving, like identity collapsing. But here's the paradox. The void is not emptiness, it is possibility. Every time something ends, space opens up for something else to begin. But you won't see the beginning if you keep staring at the ending. This brings us to the next uncomfortable truth. Most suffering continues not because of the event, but because of your refusal to enter the void. You cling to the corpse of what was because you fear the birth of what could be. You hold on to relationships that are dead, dreams that no longer fit you, identities that suffocate you, not because they make you happy, but because they make you comfortable. And as long as you choose comfort over truth, suffering will chase you. So here's the revelation. Suffering is not something to escape. It is something to understand. It is the teacher you never wanted but always needed. It pushes you into awareness. It strips away illusions. It exposes the real structure of your mind. It forces you to ask questions you were too afraid to ask. Who am I without this? What do I really want? What beliefs are controlling me? What expectations are destroying me? These questions are painful, but they are the doorway out of unconscious suffering. Your suffering is not random. It is engineered by your resistance to reality. And once you see this clearly, suffering begins to transform. It does not disappear, but it loses its power to define you. It becomes the background, not the story. It becomes the pressure that shapes meaning, not the weight that crushes it. Because suffering isn't the opposite of purpose, it is the birthplace of purpose. Without suffering, you would never stop to question. Without questioning, you would never awaken. If everything you've believed about suffering begins to crumble in part 2, then part 3 is where the floor gives way entirely. Because once you understand that suffering isn't an interruption, but a structural part of human existence, you are forced into a much heavier realization. The real source of suffering is not the world, it's your own consciousness. The world can wound you, yes, but your mind is the one that turns wounds into lifelong stories. Your consciousness is a double-edged sword. The very ability that allows you to reflect, imagine, and create is also the ability that traps you in endless cycles of questioning, doubting, replaying, and interpreting. You don't just experience life, you experience yourself experiencing life. And because of that, your suffering becomes layered, complex, psychological, existential. Animals suffer pain, but humans suffer meaning. Humans suffer thoughts, memories, fantasies, fears. Humans suffer the gap between reality and what they believe reality should be. This is why you can sit alone in a silent room and feel more tortured than someone physically injured. Your mind creates storms out of shadows. It resurrects ghosts. It revives old wounds. It projects future catastrophes. You are hurt not only by what happens, but by everything your mind continues to say about what happened. This is where the collapse of meaning truly begins, when you realize the majority of your suffering is internally generated. Not imaginary, but internally constructed. You might believe you're suffering because someone left you, but part of that suffering comes from the way you interpret their departure. I wasn't enough. I was abandoned. I must not matter. I'll never find someone again. None of these sentences are objective truth. They are emotional conclusions your mind creates to make sense of pain. The mind hates uncertainty, so it invents narratives, even cruel ones, just to feel like it knows what's happening. But what if those interpretations are wrong? What if they are distortions? What if suffering is amplified by the very stories you tell yourself about suffering? This is why two people can go through the same experience and one collapses while the other grows stronger. Not because one is better, but because one interprets the event differently. The event is external, the meaning is internal. And meaning is where suffering either multiplies or dissolves.
But let's go deeper, because meaning isn't something you consciously write. It forms from your past, your conditioning, your insecurities, your unhealed wounds. Meaning is built into you long before you start questioning it. Think about this. The beliefs you hold about love were shaped before you ever understood love. The beliefs you hold about yourself were shaped before you developed self-awareness. The beliefs you hold about purpose were handed to you before you could question them. So when life contradicts your conditioning, suffering emerges. Not because life is wrong, but because your conditioning was too fragile to withstand reality. Here's the unsettling part. Your identity, the thing you defend, protect, and obsess over, is itself a story. A story made of memories, interpretations, and roles you've adopted over the years. But you mistake this story for a stable self.
You say, "This is who I am," as if the self is a solid object that remains unchanged. But observe your own life. The person you were 5 years ago barely resembles the person you are now. Your preferences changed, your fears changed, your beliefs changed, your emotional reactions changed, even your values changed. And if they didn't change, they were forced to evolve the moment life challenged them. You mourn relationships, but you forget to mourn the versions of yourself that died inside those relationships. You mourn lost opportunities, but you forget to mourn the identity that believed those opportunities defined your worth. And you don't realize how often your suffering comes not from losing something external, but from losing a piece of who you thought you were. Here's a question you rarely ask. What if the person suffering right now is simply a version of you that needs to die? Not physically, psychologically, emotionally, existentially. What if suffering is the death cry of an outdated self? You've probably felt this before, the confusion of growing out of old friendships, the discomfort of realizing your dreams no longer excite you, the grief of discovering that the life you once wanted no longer fits who you're becoming. That grief isn't failure, it's evolution. But evolution feels like suffering because you are losing identities you once depended on for stability. This raises another question. If the self keeps changing, who are you actually protecting when you cling to identity? And more importantly, why do you assume that the version of you suffering today is the final version? Your suffering feels permanent because you identify with the self that experiences it, but suffering would look different if you understood the self is fluid. Pain belongs to the moment, suffering belongs to the story you attach to the moment. For example, when someone leaves you, the pain is simple, their presence is gone. But the suffering becomes complex when you start telling yourself what that departure means about your worth, your future, your lovability, your significance. Pain is what life gives you. Suffering is what you add to it. This is why spiritual traditions speak about ego death, not as an abstract idea, but as a psychological necessity. The ego is not arrogance. It is the collection of stories you tell yourself about who you are. And when these stories are threatened, the ego suffers. When these stories fall apart, the ego collapses. But ego death is not actual death. It is liberation from illusions that caused your suffering in the first place. Here's the paradox most people never understand. Everything you cling to for stability is the very thing that makes you unstable. You cling to identity to feel safe, but your identity keeps changing. You cling to people to avoid loneliness, but people keep changing. You cling to meaning to avoid confusion, but meaning keeps dissolving. You cling to purpose to avoid emptiness, but purpose must be rebuilt again and again. So what is left when everything collapses? Most people fear the answer: nothingness, the void, emptiness. But emptiness is not annihilation. Emptiness is the absence of illusion, and without illusion, suffering loses its fuel. Imagine you're holding sand in your hand. The tighter you clench your fist, the more the sand escapes through your fingers. Life is the same. Control is the same. Love is the same. Identity is the same. The more you cling, the more you lose. The more you grip, the more life cuts into your palm. But if you open your hand, even slightly, you stop fighting gravity. You stop fighting life. You stop fighting yourself. This is where meaning begins to shift. Not as something external, not as something divine, not as a cosmic assignment, but as something emerging from your willingness to stop clinging. When you stop trying to force the world to match your expectations, you begin to see the world clearly. When you stop fighting impermanence, you begin to participate in life instead of resisting it. When you stop defending identity, you begin to discover yourself instead of maintaining an outdated version of yourself. Meaning is not static. Meaning is not universal. Meaning is not predetermined. Meaning is a conversation between you and existence, one that changes as you do. Suffering reveals the parts of you that need to be questioned. Meaning reveals the parts of you that need to be rebuilt. Identity reveals the parts of you that need to be released. This is why the collapse of meaning is not a tragedy. It is an initiation. You are not losing purpose. You are clearing space for a purpose that belongs to you, not to your conditioning. And purpose built from truth will never collapse the way purpose built from illusion does. And now comes the most important shift of all. Once you stop clinging, suffering no longer feels like punishment. It feels like transformation. People often imagine awakening as some magical, euphoric moment, light beams, revelations, cosmic understanding. But real awakening is much quieter and much more violent. It starts when you stop running from yourself, when the distractions lose their power, when the story you've been telling yourself falls apart and you're too exhausted to build a new one immediately. Awakening begins in the silence right after you break. The silence where you finally stop pretending. The silence where suffering becomes undeniable. Not because it grows, but because your illusions die. And in that raw, unguarded silence, something else appears: awareness. Not the kind of awareness people brag about, not the shallow self-help version, but a deeper, unfiltered awareness of your own existence. Awareness is not comfortable. It does not soothe you. It exposes you. It forces you to see that your pain was amplified by your expectations, that the people you clung to were stand-ins for the parts of yourself you avoided, that the meaning you chased was borrowed, the identity you defended was temporary. And once you see this, you can never go back to unconscious living. You can never unsee the truth that nothing belongs to you. Not people, not moments, not dreams, not even the self you've been protecting for decades. Awakening begins when you stop trying to own life and begin letting life pass through you. But understanding this intellectually is not enough. You must feel it. You must live it. You must walk through the world differently, not with resistance, but with presence. Presence isn't spiritual perfection, it's simply the willingness to be awake in your own life. It is the opposite of autopilot. It is noticing when your mind tries to resurrect old narratives. It is sensing when your ego tries to defend a version of you that no longer exists. It is recognizing when your suffering is coming from the situation and when it is coming from your interpretation. Presence allows you to respond instead of react, to observe instead of drown, to choose instead of cling. And this is where suffering transforms, not by disappearing, but by becoming something else entirely. When you stop fighting suffering, suffering stops fighting you. Pain remains, yes, because pain is part of being alive. But suffering, the psychological weight, the resistance, the internal war, begins to dissolve. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, what illusion is this pain trying to burn away? You stop asking, how do I avoid discomfort? And begin asking, what truth is discomfort trying to show me? You stop believing that life owes you something and instead begin participating in life as it is. And when you do, you discover something liberating. Freedom is not the absence of suffering. Freedom is the absence of resistance to suffering. The world remains chaotic. People still disappoint you. Dreams still crumble. Loss still arrives without warning. But your relationship to these things changes. You stop falling apart every time life shifts because you no longer expect stability. You no longer cling to permanence in a world built on movement. The fear of loss loosens its grip because you finally understand that loss isn't a violation, it's the nature of existence. You begin to appreciate people not because they will stay, but because they are here now. You begin to cherish moments, not because they will last, but because they will not. You begin to understand that impermanence is not the enemy of meaning, it is the source of meaning. This is the paradox of awakening. The more you accept the temporary nature of everything, the deeper and more fearless your love becomes. You no longer love with the desperation of ownership, you love with the clarity of presence. You no longer demand guarantees, you embrace uncertainty. You no longer measure relationships by their duration, you measure them by their sincerity. Love becomes lighter, freer, more honest, not because risk disappears, but because you stop pretending risk can be eliminated. And the same is true for purpose. Once you stop expecting life to hand you a cosmic assignment, something shifts. Purpose stops being a riddle and becomes an unfolding. Purpose stops being a destination and becomes a practice. You discover that purpose isn't something future-based, it's something moment-based. Purpose appears not when you achieve something grand, but when you show up fully in your own existence. Purpose is not found out there in some mythical calling. It emerges in the way you respond to life, in the way you create meaning from chaos, in the way you transform suffering into understanding. Ask yourself, when have you felt most alive? It was never during comfort. It was never when everything stayed the same. It was during moments of intensity, pain, joy, change, risk, vulnerability, loss, love. Life awakens you through contrast. Without the darkness of suffering, meaning would have no light. Without impermanence, beauty would have no urgency. Without loss, love would lose its depth. Without questioning, there would be no awakening. Everything you fear is the same thing that makes life worth living. But this doesn't mean you surrender to suffering passively. It means you engage with suffering consciously. You stop trying to anesthetize your pain with distractions. You stop numbing your emptiness with validation. You stop outsourcing your worth to people who are just as lost as you. Instead, you begin to sit with your pain, not to drown in it, but to learn from it. You stop treating suffering as a curse and start treating it as a compass. You ask, what is this pain pointing toward? What belief is being challenged? What attachment is breaking? What part of me is ready to evolve? Suffering becomes a teacher. Not a gentle one, not a kind one, but a necessary one. And then comes the final shift. The moment where you realize that letting go is not loss. Letting go is participation in reality. You let go not because you don't care, but because caring doesn't require clinging. You let go not because you want emptiness, but because emptiness creates space. You let go not because you're detached, but because attachment was suffocating you. You begin to understand that nothing real can be lost because nothing real is owned. Love isn't owned, meaning isn't owned, moments aren't owned, even the self isn't owned. Everything is borrowed, everything is shared, everything is in motion. Awakening is simply the moment you stop fighting motion. And when you stop fighting motion, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to feel alive again. Not safe, not predictable, but deeply, vividly alive. You become lighter, not because suffering disappears, but because you stop carrying the weight of resisting it. You become clearer, not because answers fall from the sky, but because questions stop scaring you. You become freer, not because life changes, but because you change your relationship to life. And finally, you begin to see the truth that every philosopher, every mystic, every awakened mind eventually discovers. The purpose of life is not something outside you. The purpose of life is the person you become by facing suffering instead of running from it. You become the author of meaning. You become the witness of impermanence. You become the creator of yourself. And in that becoming, life stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like participation. Raw, unpredictable, heartbreaking, magnificent participation. The suffering remains, but it no longer defines you. It guides you, it sharpens you, it awakens you. And in that awakening, you finally understand you were never meant to escape suffering. You were meant to transform through it. If you reached this point, something in you has already shifted. Maybe it felt a sting, maybe a silence inside. Maybe something made more sense now than after years of empty advice. Whatever it was, you're on the path. This channel exists for that, to crack the illusion, shake the mind, pull you out of autopilot. If this touched you, if it resonated anywhere inside you, then our exchange is already complete. Just by listening, reflecting, being here, you're already helping. But if you want to go further to support, to be part of this more closely, there are ways. Becoming a member is more than support, it's belonging. It keeps this content alive, strong, deeper. You get exclusive posts behind the scenes and the feeling of building something together. The super thanks button is also there, a symbolic but powerful way to say, "This transformed me, here, keep going." But truly, if all you can do today is watch, comment, or share this with someone who needs it, that is enormous. You are helping, you are part of this. We're not building an audience, we're building a movement of lucid, awake, restless souls. And that's why this space matters, because we recognize each other. Thank you for being here, truly. See you in the next one.